Okay, good evening, everyone. It is Thursday, April 7th at 7:40 p.m. on a rainy April evening and windy. This is the Public Works, the RTM Public Works Committee. We have a quorum of 8, so we will proceed. I sent out an agenda. I hope you all got it and had a chance to look at it. So let me first ask, does anybody have any questions or problems with the agenda? Are there any recommendations or questions to change the agenda? I open that up first.
Nope.
Nope. Okay. So 2 days ago, the Board of Finance approved both the operating budgets and the capital expenditure budgets for both the Board of Education and the town of Darien. They are showing that the mill rate would be adjusted up by 2.32%, which, given all the various circumstances, is a very low number from what could have been the case. There was quite a number of circumstances that allowed them to do that. There was a number of parts of our government that had money that they are projecting will be available at the end of this present fiscal year ending of June. So they're picking up that money, not all of it. I believe, if I remember from the meeting, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 90% of it, and assuming to be able to carry that in for the next coming year. That, along with a growing grand list, and they were able to come up with the 2.32%. Yes, last night, the RTM Budget and Finance Committee met and voted on the budget and approved both budgets and capital expenditures. So this thing is moving right along. Last night, also, the Parks Department met and did the same for their area of interest, being, of course, Parks and Rec. So we did have some review of the budget back in February with our guest, Ed Gentile, and we went through a couple of segments of the budget. We have some new members since then. I don't know if they're here tonight. We can take another look at it, or I would like to, though, try and consider taking a vote on them tonight. Does anybody have any input or feeling about taking a vote? Go ahead, Patrick.
Well, I think before we start discussion, I think we have to have a motion
Yeah.
to approve.
Yeah, no.
So I will, I move that we approve the Public Works portion of the town budget as last discussed at this with this committee.
All right.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to review the operating budget. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, to
Because-
approve it.
To
To approve it.
Okay.
Our
Yeah,
portion.
for the Public Works. I believe I sent out an email earlier this week where I cited the numbers that were involved.
April 3rd.
Okay, do you have that in front of you, Patrick?
I do.
Okay, so for the operating budget, what are the numbers there?
For the current year, the Public Works operating budget is $4,476,105.
Okay. And then did I not say that the proposed is a particular number, or is that for the proposed?
I'm sorry, that is the current. The proposed budget is $4,650,117, an increase of $174,012 or 3.74%.
Okay, so that's what we're voting on is that second figure that Patrick just read off. Waddy, pick that up, please, for the interest of the minutes. Yep. Thank you. Okay, so that's what we now have on the floor as a motion to vote. Is there any discussion on the budget? Any questions, concerns, comments, feedback, good, bad, or otherwise? Don't hold back. Yes, Frank, speak.
Yeah, Rolf, I won't be shy here. I thought, as usual, that Ed did did I just mess myself up? I thought that Ed Gentile did a superb job of running through the contingencies and issues in the budget. I thought that, I think we're lucky to have his leadership and his managerial skills on our team. I work extensively, Rolf, as you know, with Darren Ostafine, his number 2, and I think they run a fantastic ship. An increase of 3.75%. Given everything that they're contending with in the supply chain as well as in the labor market, I think is a superior result, and I think we should be supporting this.
Okay, thank you, Frank, for chiming in. Anybody else want to make a statement or have a question or comment? Okay, then I guess we'll go to a vote. I'm sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
I would just say I would second that. I think that I think the town has done, and we as a group have done a pretty good job of assessing. We're not shy about asking Ed questions or the town questions about these expenditures and what's anticipated. I think it's a fairly modest increase, even though it looks like 3.74%. It's not, when compared to the total budget. This is a very small portion of it, and to be able to deliver the services that this town delivers to its residents for that amount of money, I think is beyond responsible. It's actually quite good.
Okay, well, since we've got a couple of people chiming in, I might as well join the party. Yeah, I think it's a good budget. I just wanted to have a little reflection and circumspection about the town of Darien. That we operate as a representative town government. We have the representative town meeting and all of 100 representatives. We have numerous boards and commissions, committees, and almost all of those are run on a strictly volunteer basis. Planning and zoning, environmental protection, budget and finance. And it's extraordinary because the results that we have in our budget is in large part because of the effort that is put out by all of these volunteers. And so I think that's commendable. And that's really all I have to say. All right, then. If there aren't any other comments or questions, I think we're ready to vote. So the question will be, are there any no votes? Does anybody want to vote no on this budget? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay. All right, so no one's voting no. Is anybody abstaining from the vote? Any abstentions? No abstentions. Therefore, by default, it's a unanimous approval. Thank you all very much. Congratulations. Well done. Okay, now we should move on to the capital expenditures, which is a separate part from the operating budget. And there too, there is certainly some money involved. I'm trying to find that email. Do you still have that in front of you, Patrick?
Yes, I have it. So
right.
in the proposed public works capital expenditures as proposed for fiscal year 2022 to 2023 is $2.55 million. That compares to current year expenditures of $2.385 million, which is an increase of 165,000 or 6.9%.
That's a pretty substantial increase. The only comment I would make, well, before we go for any comments, do I have a motion to vote on the capital expenditure budget for the Public Works Department of the town of Darien? Eric moves. Do I have a second? Frank seconds. Okay, the floor is open for discussion. Anybody want to comment about the capital expenditures for the next coming fiscal year?
Hey, Ralph, what does this cover?
Well, for example, there's a truck that I know Ed has been having on his waiting list for quite some time. It's deteriorating in its condition. It's one of these big trucks that goes around and does a lot of plowing, as I understand it, and they use it for other purposes as well. So I know that's part of his capital expenditure budget. I know that we also capitalize any of the street paving, as I understand it. That's not part of the operating budget. That's part of capital expenditures. Those are the two biggies.
Well, I think there's also a step up in the sidewalks, and that we're trying to capitalize some of that.
What about the fire trucks? Are the fire trucks part of this, or did they decide to buy those?
Fire trucks is under a separate budget. They have in fact, each fire department puts together their own budget. If you go to OpenGov and you drill down through it, you'll see it there. Each different department's listed with all their different needs, and then there's one person, I believe, part of the fire department group that keeps track of what their various equipment requirements are as they are presently and as they are planning to replace them into the future.
Okay.
In the past, they used to accrue for those funds, but last year the Finance and Budget, or excuse me, Board of Finance rather, changed their methodology and decided not to continue that accrual, and basically said, you know, we would just deal with it as they came being necessary to be replaced. And then probably, in most probability, because this equipment is very costly, would handle it as in a bond finance type arrangement, because the lifespan and the cost of these vehicles it's a long lifespan, it's a large cost, and that's why they're now handling it in that manner. But that is separate from Public Works. Okay. I believe when I sent out the invitation for the meeting, I had attachments at the bottom there that listed the
Rolf, just on that point, Frank here.
Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
I think it was my impression that for Public Works, that Ed is in fact accruing in some way for the future costs of the maintenance equipment, that he has a series of truck replacement events scheduled out for the next, on a kind of 2-year cycle. So in fact, even though CapEx can be a lot more lumpy than the operating budget, that Ed is doing his best to smooth that out.
Yes. Yes, I know he has a schedule, and it goes out quite a bit. I think it goes out as far as 6 years, and that's what the Board of Finance sees. They are, taking that under advisement in consideration to the future, and that's pretty much how it works right now. But yeah, it's for any large expenditures that have a longer lifespan is what that's pretty much dedicated to. And yes, my understanding is that this particular year, it's certainly the ongoing with the roads, and also the this truck that Ed's I think has this high on his list of replacing the one that we presently have in service.
And I think in fact that completing the maintenance garage refurbishment that they did over the last couple of years was essential to being able to replace this piece of equipment, because I think the issue was that the floors were so deteriorated that they couldn't park the old one or the new one in the garage fully loaded before they did the replacement work. So now that they've done the refurbishment of the, I don't want to say the dump, whatever the kind of the maintenance facility there, right, they now can take care of a new piece of equipment in the way it should be taken care of.
Yeah, well, there's a notation. Yeah, there's a notation in the budget about the fact that, yes, since the rebuild, if you will, of the maintenance center there has been completed, they have a whole, if you will, wash center that they never really had before to rinse down the equipment, get the salt and all the things that are corrosive to the equipment off of it, so that it should be able to, in fact, hopefully extend the lifespan of, future equipment, so that we don't have to replace them as often as we have done in the past. So we might get a little return on investment for having spent the money we did on that project.
Right. And Ed has also made clear that they do multi-purpose the equipment where possible. So something might be a dump truck during the spring and a snowplow in the winter, something like that.
Right. Yeah, it's a multi-role.
So they keep that equipment running.
Okay. Are there any other comments or concerns or questions about the capital non-recurring expenditures for this coming fiscal year? If not, then I think we'll put this out for a vote. I see that Richard Poley has joined the group. How are you, Richard? Good to see you.
Yeah, I have just got off another meeting, so I apologize for.
Not at all. No, I just wanted it for the record that you're here.
Hey,
So,
Ralph,
all right. Yes.
Is
Richard,
Richard,
you're buying the beer next time, Richard.
should we have Richard vote on the first operating budget, or just leave that with the 8 of us that approved it? Just leave it. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we have the unanimous vote, and we had a quorum, so I'm good with that.
We'll leave it. Okay.
All right. If there are no other questions on the capital expenditures, then we'll take it to a vote. So again, are there any no votes on the capital expenditures of $2,385,000 for the fiscal year 2022-23, an increase of $165,000 or 6.9%? Any no votes? Are there any abstentions? All right, then by default, we have a unanimous vote. Capital expenditure budget is approved. Thank you very much. And the town thanks you as well, I'm sure. All right, then. So we had another special meeting with the Department of Transportation for the 06821 rehabilitation, which is the pipe that runs under I-95 from the on-ramp side to the off-ramp side. And it was an interesting experience. One interesting aspect to the meeting, besides the normal cast of characters, which has been Fred and Jim Cameron and myself, Darren Ostafane. Ed Gentile couldn't be there. He was out of the office this week, as I understand it. But also we had Craig Flaherty in the meeting. So I'm sure many of you are probably aware of his expertise and knowledge in hydraulics and drainage. And he chimed in on the meeting. Apparently he had put together a list of comments or questions about their latest plan, which was issued in October. Unfortunately, it didn't get to the State Department of Transportation in time for this meeting for them to respond in detail, as I understand it. But he did raise some interesting questions. Particularly, he did some comparisons between what the existing slope of the pipe is and what was listed in their plan for the slope of the pipe. And they had two different numbers for the slope of the pipe, which is not possible because they're inserting a new lining in the pipe, the existing pipe, so the pipe slope would not change. So that question definitely caught them, I would say, a little off guard. Craig reissued his letter out to all the people that attended the meeting, and the Department of Transportation said, okay, we'll go through that and we'll get back to you. At this point, they feel that by June, they should be through roughly 30% of their design of this project. So there's still a long way to go. If they're at 30% in June, then they've got quite a ways to go to get to, 80 or 90%. They're still, though, holding to doing this project in 2025. And without going into the details of Craig's letter, which is quite detailed, I would just summarize it at that. I think we will be having follow-up meetings with them as they move along. And so we'll regroup and meet with them again down the road. Frank was there. So Frank, do you have anything you want to add or chime in on that meeting or this project in general?
Yeah, thanks, Rolf. I appreciate that. Just for everyone's kind of background and knowledge, if you don't know Craig Flaherty, first, great guy to work with. Professionally, he's a PE, a professional engineer. He works with Rednitz & Mead, which is a major engineering consulting firm in the area. Craig also serves the town as the chair of the Sewer Commission. So he has a lot of experience, professional experience as an engineer, a lot of town experience dealing with kind of other governmental bodies. So he kind of understands how everything works both mechanically and hydraulically on the one hand, as well as from an administrative point of view. Great guy to have in the process. Very glad he could join us. He did have a number of detailed questions, and it's a shame that that didn't get relayed to the state. The upshot of, I think, the meeting, how I'd frame it is the state has already said that they have engaged with us kind of to the maximum extent that they normally would. And they are moving ahead with this project. The train is leaving the station. And among those of us who have been frequently involved with this project, I think we have come to the consensus that the state is working with us as a matter of courtesy, not as a matter of necessity. They could just drive the train from this point forward, and they're still talking to us because they kind of want us to all get along. But they're not waiting for us to say yes or no or anything. They're moving ahead.
Yeah, they made it pretty clear that, yes, we have to file with the Department of Environmental Protection, but we do not have to file with, the local municipality for any permits to do this project.
I guess what I'd say, my biggest area of concern for me, and Rolf is very tired of hearing me say it, is I wanted to make sure that the volume throughput of the new pipe after it's reconstructed is no less than the current pipe can convey right now. And I'm going to cut through all the jargon that they threw at us in the meeting a couple of days ago. But basically, what they said is when they put the new pipe in, it's going to have a higher capacity, and they seem to think it's going to be more than double the capacity of the existing pipe for kind of engineering and structural factors, even though it's physically a smaller pipe. And furthermore, they said to us, we had to cut through the jargon, but basically, if we solved all our flooding problems in the heights, if we replaced the stone culvert, which is underneath the train tracks, with a much larger pipe that could convey all the flooding out of the heights, which is not going to happen anytime soon, but I wanted to make sure we didn't prevent that. If we solve that problem and they finish this project, they seem to think, or not seem to think, they asserted that there would be enough capacity in the pipe, in the new pipe they're putting under the highway, to take all that water flow, and that we would not have a flooding problem on the highway. I think that's the biggest volume issue that we have with that. We know in this group two important facts about that. Number one, that fixing the flooding in the heights by fixing the culvert under the railroad tracks, the stone culvert, is not going to happen anytime soon, but we wanted to make sure that that wasn't prevented by this project. And number two, if we did solve all those problems, we know that would create a major issue downstream from this project. Rolf, can you remind me of the names of the streets, like Maple Street and is it Relihan?
There's Relihan, there's Maple, and of course there's that whole drainage area that runs behind Baker's Field.
Right.
And that's the part that concerns me most, because that drainage ditch, if you will, that it runs right behind residential homes. And I could see that flooding out without much difficulty. It was reported
solving the problem in the heights, we got to make sure we don't move that problem downstream, because that's not fair to anybody, right? But my goal was to make sure that when they do this project under the highway, that it doesn't prevent us from solving problems in the future. And I'm pretty satisfied that that's what's going to happen, that this project is going to at least not hurt, and in fact it might help. So I'm cautiously comforted by that. I do want to see them finish and fix their numerical analysis that they need to give to Craig Flaherty, but hoping that that's going to come through. I'm pretty satisfied that this is not one where we need to lie down in front of the bulldozers.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see that stone culvert be addressed, but I'm probably among many other people, and that's been pending for, I don't know, forever, I think, as far as I know. So, yes, Patrick.
I just wonder if you could circulate Craig's letter, because I didn't receive that. And while I'm not an engineer, I would be curious to see what his observations are.
Yeah, I can forward that to the committee, and for your reading pleasure.
And I'm curious. Just I think that the state in the last meeting that I attended were very put off by even attempting to estimate whether or not the new liner would be able to handle all of the water that is upstream, even when that's fixed. So I'll go back and watch the replay, but I'm actually curious that they made that prediction that they would be able to service that much water.
Well, I would only annotate, and you correct me here, Frank, if I misstate this, but they did say that if the culvert were replaced with a larger pipe that could take all that water that we want to have come from north to south, that pipe would be put to the max, that pipe would be put to under pressure with the water flow that would then occur. So they weren't saying that a rosy picture. They were saying we can handle it with that pipe taking pretty much all that it can take, but we can handle it. So that's, Frank, what do you think?
Yeah, so Patrick, I do have some background in this area, so I don't want to present myself as an engineer, but there's different kinds of mathematical, this is all mathematical modeling. It's all kind of estimating what would happen in the future under different circumstances. There are really two kinds of models that are relevant for this. One is kind of an open channel model, like imagine a pipe that's half full or a stream in a riverbed, right? It's not constrained all around, right? And that's the model they normally use for this kind of pipe because it's normally not full, right? And using that kind of open channel model, the pipe as replaced can get almost all the water through, but not quite. Something like 95% of the water. But of course, in a big storm, 5% of the water is a problem. What they said to us is that because when that pipe gets to capacity, you change to that second kind of model where the pipe is fully pressurized, where the pipe is completely full. Imagine like you had filled up your sink and then you open up the drain and that drain pipe is full of water, right? That then has pressure behind it. So with that additional factor of the pressure behind it, it will convey all the water. And they said it will have about a foot of what they call freeboard, which is like margin of error distance between the top of the water and the spillover point over onto the highway.
No, I get the reference. I guess I noted their reluctance to even do that calculation of if the upstream culvert had been repaired. At least I noted that there was a reluctance on their part to even predict that, because they were, or at least they feigned ignorance of what the actual upstream blockage was underneath the railroad tracks. So I'm actually pleased to hear that they've gone back and looked at it and have suggested that even repaired, that this new liner will still be able to handle the estimated water that will be upstream from a repaired culvert. So I find that encouraging, but it also kicks the can over to us when that culvert gets repaired, that we're going to have to be able to do one of several things. And I don't want to jump the gun here, but be prepared to either deal with that extra flow downstream one way or another.
Yeah, because so Patrick, that did come out in the meeting. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, so Patrick, I think the reason you heard them be reluctant last time is because in their normal project process, they need to kind of evaluate a before and an after. And the before is the current condition, and the after is after the placement of the pipe under the highway. So the after scenario does not include anything upstream of the pipe, like like going under the tracks. So it's not on their normal kind of workflow. So I think that may be some of the source of some of the reluctance you heard on the prior call. They claim that they have run that scenario now, and that they gave us the results that basically the pipe would be fully charged and pressurized, and there would still not be what they called a surcharge, or what we would call flooding onto the highway, even in a 50-year storm, and then we'd have that foot of what they call freeboard. But I think they were reluctant to talk about that at the prior meeting because it's not part of their normal evaluation process.
Yeah, the engineer that we were speaking with about that particular topic said that we ran 2 models, which we normally don't do, but we wanted to see. So they ran the model for what they want to do, just in the interest of the pipe itself. Then they ran a second model with the assumption that, yes, the stone culvert would be a larger discharge, more volume. Can we handle it? And the model says, yes, it can handle it. So they did take like a second look since our first meeting. So that is encouraging.
We're going to have to pay in the end anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Well, you know, as that conversation evolved, then yes, I believe it was Darren who made the point, okay, but should we ever get there one day, then yeah, full evaluation for the effects to the downstream will have to be conducted, because it's definitely going to change how that's going to work. Yeah. So, I mean, we're postulating about a lot of things that would all have to come together, and that's not going to happen tomorrow morning, needless to say, but it's something that's definitely out there as a possibility.
Okay.
All right. If there isn't any other comments or questions about that meeting, I'd like to move on the agenda here to another item that I'm bringing up here, and that's this bill that was passed last July in Hartford that granted the municipalities greater powers to establish what they call a storm authority. And I sent out the bill, I believe, in an email as an attachment. I hope you all got it. I don't know if you had a chance to read it. It's not that long. I think it's only like maybe 4 or 5 pages. But you know, it basically does allow the town, through an ordinance by its legislative body, designate any existing board or commission, or to establish a new board or commission as the stormwater authority for such municipality. A new board or commission is created. Such municipality shall by ordinance determine the number of members thereof, their compensation, if any, whether such members shall be elected or appointed, so on and so forth. So, and it would grant this stormwater authority the power to develop a stormwater management program, including but not limited to a program for construction, post-construction, site stormwater runoff control, including controlled detention and prevention of stormwater runoff from development sites, program for control and abatement. I mean, it goes on and on. Provide public education and outreach, provide for administration of the stormwater management program, establish geographic boundaries of the stormwater authority district, so on and so forth. This would all have to go through, you know, full vetting and approval with RTM and et cetera, et cetera. So it would be a substantial undertaking. I also sent out the video where the RTM, excuse me, not the RTM, the Board of Selectmen, the last meeting that Jamie Stevenson held before she retired from the Board of Selectmen, where a number of people from the town made a presentation about our state of the union, if you will, as it relates to drainage and stormwater runoff. And in that meeting, town council brought to the administration, to their attention, this bill and these new powers that can be instituted if the town wished to do so. I personally have started to get some feedback from some people within the town that had seriously been flooded during the heavy rains of last year. And so this one particular gentleman had asked me, what's the town's plan to try and do something to mitigate this flooding? And I looked up his address. I don't know if any of you have ever taken advantage of the Map Geo application website. It's extremely powerful website. You can look at any part of the town. It shows the water courses, the topography, whether it's a flood zone or if it's just an inland waterway, et cetera, et cetera. And this gentleman was right on the edge of a flood zone, and the waterway that came down into his property is Cummings Brook, which is another waterway of the many that we have in town. And pretty much all of that waterway comes through private residential properties. And so the town's posture pretty much up to this point has been that, that we just don't go there. We do not intercede per se with drainage problems that exist on private properties. And this, however, does present itself as a possibility where an authority could be created and could be given some rights to intercede where obvious problems exist. And I just wanted to put it out there. If you haven't had a chance to read it, I would encourage you to do so. And I'd like to come away with some idea whether we think this idea has any merit or not. I can tell you that I'm not aware of any steps being taken by the Board of Selectmen to entertain what's possible through this bill. I'm going to assume that that's because they've been busy with other things like the budget, and they just haven't had the time to get to consider something like this. But I think it is worth consideration at least. So has anybody had a chance to read it in more detail? And does anybody have any comments or questions about it?
I do have a question, Rolf. Are there other towns that have these committees or authorities?
I believe there are other towns that have established water authorities, if you will. Which ones specifically? I'd have to look into it to see who else is joined in on this and taken advantage of it, and to what extent. What if they passed through their legislative body an authority, what powers did they give it? Okay,
right.
Because we might only be willing to go so far, even if we were to even entertain the idea. Okay, because these are private properties, there's no question, but there's also problems with a lot of drainage and flooding that's causing real damage for people. Any other comments or questions?
For
Yes,
me, I also heard from some constituents that I was going to bring up during the new business portion. But it seems like we have commissioned a lot of studies that have pointed to the flooding that we have had for 50 years. And we keep commissioning the studies and then deciding not to do anything because of the private property issue. If creating this commission might move us forward, I don't know. I'm so new to this. Is this just creating another commission that's going to do the same studies, or would this commission actually have power to do something that we can't do now?
Well, in my again, the town would have to determine, how far they want to go with this thing. But according to what's been passed at the state level, I mean, this commission would have powers, if granted, to raise funds and to utilize those funds to deal with problems, or could also go to certain properties where problems exist and ask them to remediate certain conditions in order to alleviate problems that they might be causing downstream from an obstruction that they might have or something like that. But it would give them an opportunity to intercede more than what we have done in the past. I read recently the Stony Brook analysis that was conducted, I think it was in 2009. So that's a little while ago. And
I just read it earlier today.
Okay, very good. And they definitely made a specific reference to the fact that, yes, there were problems that were identified, but they were basically, we're not going to go there because it's private property.
Problems
So-
that were identified in 1957. So it's been a while since we've been dealing with this. I mean, I don't feel ready to decide about this commission now, but and I defer to those of you who have more experience with this. But if there's a way to make some sort of progress, I would be in favor of that.
Anybody else want to comment one way or another? I'm considering to, and this is just me, myself, personally speaking, approaching the Board of Selectmen with an email about this raised bill, because this was brought to their attention back in October. It was a different Board of Selectmen, okay, because it was Jamie's last meeting. There are a number of board members that have moved on and new board members that are now on the board. Monica McNally was on the board at that time. So I'm considering, again, myself, shooting something into them about this bill and saying, are you folks going to consider this? And what are your ideas or what are your thoughts? That's just myself, though. So I'm just trying to get a feel for whether, other people have gotten feedback similar to what I've gotten, and what their experience is. Paige, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of tend to agree with Jacqueline that I'm not one to continue doing studies just to find out that we're not going to do anything. So anything that does have forward progress. I mean, our business was flooded twice this past year, and it is on private property, and I think some of the stuff was fixed, but there's a lot more to be fixed. So I don't see the flooding getting better anytime soon, given the current climate situation. So if we're going to continue getting worse and not doing anything about it, that seems like a not the best idea to me.
Patrick, did you want to say something?
Well, I just a sort of a high level observation, and that is, I mean, this is the Public Works Committee. We are charged with sort of a wide advisory responsibilities on, what the town could and should be doing, at least from our perspective. Given that, flooding is a known issue, I'm not sure that I agree 100% with Jackie that we've done all these studies and done nothing. We are taking, over the years, we have taken some steps. Clearly, some steps have not been, and many steps that need to be taken are out of our boundaries. And what my read, and I did not study this, but I did read the bill, so I haven't really, I need to dive into it much more deeply. But this type of entity would be empowered to take action. So the question is, and it is a much higher level question, and I think you're right, Rolf. This needs to go to the Board of Selectmen for them to decide whether or not this is an area that we need to they want to dive into. It's fraught with not only financial but political consequences, and it's a matter of bandwidth of when and how much of this we can deal with. I happen to agree with those that have said, look, this is a problem that's not going to go away, so we need to come up with a plan. And I think that we just need the commitment. It's not going to be cheap, and it's going to take a lot of negotiation between us and the state and private property owners to start to remedy this and come up with a plan that's going to work. And it's going to far outlive us. So I'm just at a high level. I'm in favor of coming up with of approving some sort of authority that's going to take at least a directional control of how we deal with this issue in town. And if that's what this does, I would sort of be in favor of it. But I have not spoken to anybody in the Board of Selectmen about that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your input. Yes, Jeff, go ahead.
I wasn't clear from my read, and far from an expert, but from my read of the bill as to whether it actually created new authority over over private property owners, or whether because it didn't create new authority to tax or to generate revenues, because the town already has that authority. I didn't see or couldn't detect where it actually changed the relationship between what the town is able to do vis-a-vis private landowners, or whether it simply created the ability to create a commission to focus the already existing authority in a particular body. So to me, there's a big difference there, because the town, if it already has the authority to do everything and it simply hasn't used it, that's a completely different matter from whether the bill creates new authority that gives us something more to stand on to create an action plan.
That's
Yes,
a great
Patrick.
point, Jeff.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jeff. I think my read of it was it creates an authority which then creates its own budget. And so rather than dealing with, Maple Street this year and, that this year, and each one of those parcels or each one of those parts of the problem are dealt with, my read of it was it creates an authority which creates a plan that gets budgeted, and that authority, storm authority, then deals with it in a we're talking about government here, in a more logical way, and where there's maybe not a beginning, middle, and end, but it's sort of, all dealt with from one standpoint.
A focus.
That's a better way to put it. Thanks.
Well, town council's presentation in that October meeting said that the EPC, and we certainly have an EPC in the town of Darien, already is granted some of these powers. What he was saying was that this bill, if anything, reinforces and adds to those powers. And his recommendation was, he did not recommend that we create another authority within the town government. He was recommending more that we consider just augmenting to the EPC what this bill allows, and then within the auspices of the EPC, they could pursue these powers. I'll just cite one thing here that I'm reading, that any stormwater authority created by a municipality pursuant to subsection A of this may levy fees approved by the legislative body of the municipality in accordance with the provisions of subdivision 3 of this subsection on property owners of the municipality, except as specified subdivision 2 for the purpose described subsection B, establishing fees for any properties in its district. The stormwater authority may and shall consider criteria including but not limited to the area of the property containing impervious surfaces from which stormwater runoff is generated, land use types that result in higher or lower concentrations of stormwater, pollution, and grand list valuation of the property. So, I mean, they're definitely saying that, there's powers there that this authority can exert. Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, so I guess, Rolf, it would seem to me that the fastest way to deal with this, with the biggest bang for the buck, so to speak, is to designate the EPC, at least in the near term, as our stormwater authority. And if we determine with all the powers and rights and whatever that this new legislation gives it, we give that to the EPC because it already exists, right? And then if we decide, or the EPC decides in their wisdom that they don't have enough bandwidth, or there's more issues coming up, or for whatever legitimate reason, they may want to create a separate authority. We can do that later. But it would seem like it would be foolish of us not to at least take that power and assign it to somebody. And it seems like the EPC, to your point, is the natural place to go. So I guess I'd recommend that I don't know if we have to make a motion or if we're just kind of talking about it here, but it would seem like that's the logical thing, the logical next step that we would recommend, in a non-binding way to.
Yeah, essentially that's what council was recommending, that you work this within the existing EPC organization, but where it goes from there, as you point out, they got a pretty full plate themselves with various applications, because we have so many waterways, and that we have people who are wanting to develop properties within those waterways, they've got a pretty busy schedule. I mean, I have yet to see a meeting that's anything less than 2 hours, and quite often can go up to 3 hours to get through all of the different nuances of every application and how it affects with dealing with water. So I think that would be the place to go. I agree, but how they develop it from there, that's a whole nother matter. I would think they want possibly consider like a subgroup within EPC dedicated to this water control authority, if you will. But that's just me speaking.
Do I need to write any notes that we're going to recommend anything to anybody or not?
Well, I think we can at least say that that there is a general consensus. And if I'm speaking prematurely, then people please chime in. But I think we can say that.
So, I mean, Rolf, the way we would normally deal with that is to make a motion to take a vote of the sense of the meeting.
Okay. Does anybody see? I'm not sure that we should do that tonight. Okay. My intent here was to just put this out there, so to speak, give you all a chance to be more heightened in your awareness to this possibility, ask you to read carefully the bill so that you're as acquainted with it as you can be. And then I think when our next meeting, we should maybe revisit this. And after everybody's had a chance to digest more, you can send me questions in the meantime, which I would encourage you to do. And then we would entertain about anything about a motion. Does anybody disagree with that approach?
I don't disagree, but I think to augment that, I think if we're going to even take a sense of the committee and recommend that this be referred to the EPC, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I'm not as familiar with the EPC to know whether or not they have the capacity to deal with it, both manpower wise as well as bandwidth wise, to deal with it, because this is giving a lot more power to a smaller group. It could just be a way of saying, see, we dealt with it and it's away, and it's not really going to advance the ball.
Yeah, no, I again, my thinking is, again, to just move this up to the Board of Selectmen, because I think it's for them to try and make a determination about where it's appropriate to be. We may have an opinion that we would tend to agree with the council's recommendation, but ultimately that's something they would have to set the direction for, I believe. And then there would have to be some discussion with the EPC itself about how capable they would be to take this on. Again, I think they're plenty busy with what they've got going on their plate right now. I think it would have to be an added group of personnel as a subset to the EPC dedicated to the water drainage issue. That's how I see it. And I would start that question with the Board of Selectmen, because ultimately this would have to be put out, as a vote at the RTM to go forward with any sort of approach that we're talking about here. So this isn't going to happen, just from an email. Certainly, this would just be the beginning of what would be a long course that we would have to follow to see if it would be implemented. And there'd have to be a lot of discussion with both the Board of Selectmen and the EPC to that end, and with General Counsel, because they have to chime in on the legalese of the whole thing. So yeah, we're talking about kind of a big deal. Anybody else have a comment, question, concern? All right, I would just, leave it in the record, Waddy, that, we had a discussion about this bill, that our consensus is to all reflect on it. I would encourage everybody to watch that video. I'll send it out again if you wish. It was back in October, and Wayne Fox made the presentation about this bill and what powers it grants the town to do. And I think then maybe we reconvene at our next meeting and take another look at it. And we'll all be, I think, a little bit smarter at that point too about it, to come with some ideas about where we want to go, if we want to go. Is that all right? Okay. All right. Thank you all very much for your ears. I appreciate that, your open-mindedness. All right, we're almost coming to the end here, but anybody got any liaison committee reports? Sewer Commission, Frank, you got anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be real quick. I have the Sewer Commission agenda and the draft minutes here in front of me. The highlights that I would give is that, they had a meeting just earlier this week. There was a significant amount of discussion about work at 3 Parklands Drive and the sewer capacity there, and how the sewer system overall is going to deal with that, and kind of what fair hookup charges are in order for new people who are hooking into an existing sewer. Again, not to get too deep in the weeds, but in general, people pay hookup charges when sewers are put in the streets. And if people are now hooking into especially a potential large volume new development, would be hooking into an existing sewer, should they get that for free? The answer is probably no. And so how do we fairly assess them a charge? The other major thing that we've talked about in the past, there's updates, on multiple projects underway, like Baywater Corbin. The Stony Brook pump has an abandoned sewer attached to it, and they're talking about the normal kind of management processes of the sewer department. Don't need to go too deep in the detail, but the one thing that we have talked about a lot is the I&I report, which is infiltration and I forget the other I. Inflow. Thank you. So that's basically, we've talked about this in the past, that the amount of water that we send to the sewer treatment center in Stamford is somewhere between 150 to 200% of what we buy from Aquarium, right? So that's a lot of either stormwater coming in or other infiltration through old pipes, things like that. And they have, I think at this point now, finally, as a formal matter, finalized and have formally conveyed that report to the Sewer Commission, and now they're going to start to kind of act on that. Some of those projects are already underway. For example, they are going to be relining a particularly leaky and particularly long piece of sewer pipe underneath Old Kings Highway South, which they know is a source of I&I. So there are individual spot projects they're going to be taking on based on that report. And then as a more general issue, they are going to be doing a lot of diagnostics in town about finding out who is and who is not either hooked up illegally to the sewer system, or who might be dumping their stormwater into the sewers, or other things like that, to try and reduce the amount of I&I. Rolf, I know you're a frequent sewer fan. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Well, 2 things. First of all, the issue about the 60-unit apartment building that's going up, or what is it, Parkland Drive? Yeah. They did come up with a formula, but they were struggling a little bit because this was really the first time that they are applying a fee for sewer hookup. The town of Darien has not had a sewer hookup fee in its books, if you will, in the code, until only in the past year. Okay, sewer hookups were done without fees in the past. So now they're instituting to re-hook up an existing or to add a new one. Either way, fees will now be applied. And so
just to be clear, though, when they put a new sewer in the ground, there was definitely a fee charge to everybody who was going to be on or near that sewer, right? So I think what we're talking about is a new development or an intensification of development near an existing sewer. Because in the past, like if you're in a neighborhood that has no sewer and they put a new one in, you definitely pay for that lateral. Right.
Well, yeah. I'd have to go back and read more carefully as to whether that's existing or new. I know, for example, Corbin Drive, that whole project, that's going to have a sewer fee to hook up all of those apartments and everything, for sure. But the wording on how they calculate and apply the fees came up as something that they had to review clearly with this particular application. And it ended up that they concluded that it would be about a $30,000 fee for that particular development to hook up. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the I&I that you mentioned, Frank, I just recently took the plunge and hooked my 2 sump pumps to go out into my yard, so it would no longer go into the sewer system. And so I bit the bullet. I think there are a lot of other homeowners out there that are maybe in the same situation that they need to do the same. I will say this, after having done so and seeing the amount of water that was being pumped out, it was a lot more than I thought really was going out. Okay. So it was an eye-opening, to see the difference, visually see the water as it's being pumped out into the yard. So I would encourage, because it is I think quite a substantial part of that excess amount of water that we're sending to Stanford. So I'll just leave it at that. And anybody else have any comments or questions about sewers? No? Okay. Advisory Committee on Sustainability, Jackie, you got anything?
I watched a recording of, there was a meeting yesterday. I haven't watched that one, but the meeting before that, they were talking about Earth Day. There is going to be an event at the Darien Nature Center on April 23rd, and there are going to be compost giveaways at the transfer station on the 23rd and the 30th.
All right.
And that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. 5 Mile River Commission, Richard,
No,
are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Nothing to report.
Okay.
Well, just for information, most of the flooding is 5 Mile River will be in Norwalk. And that's where historically most of the problem resides, because as you go up by the community college, there's a lot of forest type area with all kinds of debris in the 5 Mile River, which creates more flooding up there than downstream.
So you think the problem lies more upstream?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, there is problems with Darien, but historically more of the problem has been upstream and not a lot has been done. And I can just give this insight. Roughly, say 15 years ago, I attended a meeting and they were trying to correct the problem, some homeowners, and they wanted to take the stones out of the stream that come down from New Canaan. And the Corps of Engineers at the meeting said, yes, go ahead and do that. And Connecticut State Environmental Protection people said, no, you can't take the stones out of the stream without our permission. And this kind of illustrates the great difficulty when you try to get into the flooding aspect. And when I say stones, I'm saying an awful lot of stones.
Big ones. Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because this bill has a paragraph that says the authority may, subject to the commissioner's approval, enter into contracts with any municipal or regional entity to accomplish purposes of this section. Meaning that if we wanted to engage in some sort of an agreement with, let's say, New Canaan, which has a lot of a number of water courses that come down into Darien. So if we were to negotiate an agreement with them about doing some sort of flood mitigation, the town would, through this authority, would have the ability to engage with New Canaan on that basis. So
Yes.
that's another aspect of this to consider.
Great. All right, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Public health and safety. Is Carrie here or Lindsay? I don't think they're here tonight.
You
Okay.
skipped coastal waters, but there has been a meeting. It's on Monday, so I'll have a report next time, hopefully.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think Carrie or Lindsay are here tonight, so we'll move on. EPC. The only thing I can tell you is what I've mentioned earlier. That they're very busy. They have one particular application on the records right now. In fact, they had a public hearing on it. I believe it was last night. I didn't have a chance to watch it because I was more interested to hear what the Finance and Budget Committee was doing. But yes, there is an application. I don't know if it's still open for public hearings or not. I'll have to look into that. But this particular property, they want to put in a pool in the backyard. And there is the Cummings Brook that runs right through their property. apparently they had significant flooding during the storms last year, so they're proposing a lot of landscape work to buffet around the house so that if the flooding occurs again, that they've got some protection to the house. But at the same time, they want to put in an in-ground pool, so they have to put it way up on the eastern side of the property to keep it away from the water course and the water flow. So it's just another example of the, I don't know, somewhat extraordinary measures that they have to go through. In this case, in particular, to put in a pool, which I can understand, wanting a pool, but it has to be done so that it doesn't affect, other or obstruct, waterways that need to flow freely downriver. And as it turns out, that particular Cummings Brook does come downriver. Eventually, it carries into Stony Brook, and Stony Brook, as you know, this past year caused very significant flooding. We had to buy out the home on Crimmins Road. So the upstream definitely has a real impact. And so that's part of why I'm interested in this bill. Transfer station / swap shop, which was kind of open, but I think, Jeff, you kind of said you might get in there.
Nothing major. I mean, we're in full swing on the transition of the seasons, and so as Jacqueline mentioned, the compost distribution that's happening here twice in May. No other major things to report.
Okay. So as I mentioned, we'll just briefly talk the calendar here for a minute. Board of Finance submitted the proposed budget to the RTM Finance and Budget Committee, which approved it last night. When the meeting comes up in May, that's when it will be put out to the full RTM for a vote. Okay. So I will have to put together a report from the perspective of Public Works relative to the budget for that meeting. And then that's about it for the calendar. With regards to virtual meetings, we are still good through the end of April. Our next meeting is scheduled for I believe the 28th of April, in preparation for that May 9th meeting. I'm assuming we'll have some sort of an agenda, but that could conceivably be the last virtual meeting that we will have. The RTM Rules Committee is apparently sending a letter to Hartford to appeal to them to extend the powers of us conducting virtual meetings, and we'll have to see what they rule, because it's really up to them. They're the ones calling the shots on this. And so maybe we'll have some new information by our next meeting to know if they're going to extend it or not. Go ahead, Paige.
So the Rules Committee wants to extend it?
Yes, apparently they're interested to say, yeah, can we keep this thing going?
Really?
Yes.
Huh. Okay.
And so they're going to write the letter and send it in there for whatever that's worth. Okay. I mean, the legislature is going to do whatever it's going to do. Mm-hmm. I've already made a reservation for a meeting in person for our May meeting with Town Hall, and the auditorium was available. So I booked it.
Great.
So we'll have plenty of room. We can spread out. The only thing is we have to be sure we watch out about the acoustics there. It's not the best acoustics, and we have to make sure we're heard on the mics wherever they are. But that would be our first in-person, would be in May, assuming that we're not able to extend beyond then. So get ready, person to person. Okay. That's about it. Other than, does anybody have new business? Paige, go ahead.
I just had a question on the Rules Committee submitting that to Hartford. I would just think that would be something that the whole RTM would vote on and be like, I don't know, like it never came up in the RTM meeting. So I don't know how it works, though. I'm super new here. So I apologize.
This was powers that were granted to the municipalities as a result of the pandemic.
Right.
Okay. The law prior to that was basically, if you're going to have people meet and vote, they have to meet in person. You have to be together face to face to vote on any issue. But they suspended that and allowed the virtual meeting to take the place of that. But that was was a provision that had a deadline or the day when it expires, and that's the end of April.
Right.
So, unless they're willing to extend that, then our May meeting will have to be in person. Otherwise, we will not be able to vote and have it be legal
Right.
with the government. Yeah,
I
Patrick,
just-
you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I think what the Rules Committee is hoping to encourage Hartford is to be able to allow hybrid so that,
okay.
but that's somewhat dependent on the having audio and visual capabilities in each of the meeting rooms where we're meeting in person. So this, I don't think this is going to be, finalized, anytime soon, but we are, as the budget, I think we approved a provision of the budget to help, certainly on the some of the meeting rooms to fully equip. So.
Yeah, there's two issues. A, would they allow it, and B, can we do it?
Yeah.
And right now, I think the only room that even would feasibly have that capability would be the main room 206. I don't know if the other rooms, like the auditorium, would have that capability. And so there's a lot that still has to be
and software
thrashed out.
People to do it, and 109 can do it, but one of the ARPA provisions was, I think we allocated from this committee about 15,000 to do one of the other meetings. So,
Okay.
but I happen to agree with you, Paige. I think it ought to be up to the Rules Committee does make a lot of decisions for the full RTM, which are in the interest of the whole body.
I see what you're saying. Rather than them just sending off a letter, should they not have at least
inquired
RTM about that?
Like, see take a temperature, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. Does everybody agree that we should ask for this to be extended?
Right. It's weird.
Okay.
That's the Rules Committee.
Did we ever approve the minutes for March 10th?
Oh, we did not.
No, that's something we need to do there. Did everybody, I sent out the March 10th minutes. I don't know if you all had a chance to read it. I have to apologize to Jeff Krause, excuse me. Jeff, I blew it on Jim Palin. It's not a PH, it's just Jim Palin, PA.
I just do what I'm instructed to do.
I know you did, and I blew it big time. I apologize. So that's one correction, the only correction I have. Anybody else have anything to say about the minutes from March 10th? Okay, do I have a motion to?
Thank you for doing them.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
yes, Waddy, you have a question?
Oh, no, I'll motion to approve them.
All right, we have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Jeff Krause. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, does anybody vote no to approve the minutes? Does anybody abstain to approve the minutes? By default, it's a majority rules. Minutes are approved. Okay, before we leave, any new business? Jacqueline, I thought you might have had a hand up for about new business.
Yes, I heard from two constituents in District 2 who I think were frustrated by the ARPA list. They were under the impression that there had been some recommendations that had made to address the Stony Brook flooding that were new culverts and earth berms. And they were under the impression that it was a relatively quick fix. So I wanted to see what this board's experience was. They referred to the Malone and McBroom report, which I went back and read today. It doesn't seem like there's a quick fix. It seems like it is new culverts and earth berms and concrete walls and retaining walls, but it's the issue that we talked about previously. It's on private property. There were some improvements to be made to Boston Post Road from the bridge area before the light at the intersection of Old Kings Highway and Renshaw that had been bid out in the 80s, and this town decided not to do because it was too expensive. I don't know what the history of this is. I told them that I would look into it. The names are Carla Thompson and Mike Sawatsky. I don't know if those names are known to anybody. And I think this is just the issue that we come up with, that there's flooding. We know there's flooding. We know there's going to be flooding, but there isn't a simple fix. I don't know if anyone else has input on that.
Well, I agree. I don't think there's a simple fix. I definitely agree with that. I'm just looking for a mechanism, if you will, a government mechanism on, and I'm not a big proponent of government involvement per se, but in this case, I think some involvement is going to be necessary. I'm looking just for a venue through which the town can start to address these issues. And I think this bill might serve as the way forward. So that's where I'm at. And it's
So I
not
think
going
I'll
to
probably just encourage them to support that bill, or to read more about that bill. I think it was just the look of, we had this kind of sudden windfall of the ARPA funds, and the fact that we were using it for other things instead of to address this one area in town that's been flooding for 50 years was a bitter pill for them.
Yeah, I've gotten similar feedback that I alluded to earlier. I heard that there's money available from the federal government. What are you going to spend on this, on our area where we live? And I had the unfortunate pleasure of having to explain to him that this has been looked at, but it's not going to go forward because for the most part it's private property.
Right.
Oh, so I'm going to have to live with somebody else's property that's causing me problems. I'm like, well, at the moment, yes, that's unfortunately the case. So, and
Rolf, I mean, I think it bears repeating, Rolf, that we know the areas in town that are chronic flood problems. And Ed Gentile has been very well on top of which areas are serious flood problems and where are there more or less feasible fixes to those flood problems. And so I think he's done actually quite a good job of triangulating across where we have the greatest frequency of floods, where we have the greatest severity of floods, and where we have the greatest opportunity to remediate. So I think Ed plays his cards close to the vest. If your constituents want to talk with Ed, I'm sure he would kind of share as much as he's going to share with anybody in public, right? That would include us.
They did reach out to him already. Unfortunately, his response, which was forwarded to me, was fine, but read a little bit as, well, this was all before my time, so I don't really have any input on it, which they did not receive very well.
Well, I can imagine, yeah.
All right, so that just adds impetus to take a close look at this bill. We'll reconvene, we'll rediscuss it, we'll come up with some ideas about where we want to go from there. I've expressed some ideas of my own at the moment, but I want to be sure we're all as knowledgeable as we can be as we go step by step. All right. If any other new business, speak now or forever hold your peace, at least for this evening. If not, then I will entertain them. I'm sorry?
Hold your peace for a month.
Yeah. All right. If not, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment. Jackie motions, Frank seconds. Anybody vote no? Anybody abstain? All right. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you all so much for your time and your volunteerism.
Hey, Rolf, just before everybody goes, I just want to say, hey, thanks for sending out all these links to the various meetings and notes from other meetings. I have to tell you, it is enormously helpful and saves me a lot of time and allows me to actually, read through things that I normally wouldn't have the time to do. So thanks very much for doing that. Really appreciate it.
That's good feedback, Patrick, because that was precisely what I had in mind as I continue to do what I do, which is send out these bits of information, these recordings, these bills, these minutes from other meetings, whatever it might be, so that you guys can be as informed as possible when we get together. So I will do my level best to keep that going.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I second that, absolutely.
Night, everyone.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Have a good evening.
Bye.